Right, I'm Ida Namur. I'm with AECOM's advisory team, where I focus on enterprise sustainability and decarbonization strategy. AECOM is a Fortune 500 professional services firm. We're based in the US, where the majority of our business is, but we have significant operations in Europe, Asia, and Australia and New Zealand as well. So today I'm going to be talking about a couple of different topics here. I do want to make a caveat. I'm probably more of a carbon generalist than a carbon expert, but I will work to earn my shirt there, hopefully, today. I'm going to tell you a little bit about decarbonization at AECOM and our journey, and talk a little bit about switching the way we're thinking from scopes to a system. I'm going to give you some case studies, and then end it all with bringing it together. Right, so AECOM, back in 2021, we were one of the first companies of our kind to get our science-based targets verified by SBTi. We have a net zero target by 2040 with interim scope 1 and 2 targets of a 60% reduction by 2030 and scope 3 reduction by 50% by 2030. When we were looking at our carbon footprint, you can see here this little figure. It's just an illustration of our emissions profile. Since we are a professional services or brains by the hour kind of company, we don't really have that much of an operational footprint. We own a few buildings, we have a vehicle fleet, and we buy energy, but the majority of our emissions are in scope 3, which is mostly around business travel, which there's only so much you can reduce. And some in our project portfolio, especially if we have a construction management business where some of those subcontractors and materials flow through our books, so they get counted toward our scope 3. But the kind of work that we deliver for our clients and the indirect emissions associated with that, when we were talking about planning, design, construction management, and operation and maintenance, is orders of magnitude higher. But that really falls out of that SBTi boundary. So what we did then is we're saying, well, okay, we're going to call these emissions scope X. It's beyond our scope 3. You might think of them maybe as scope 4 or beyond value chain emissions. But we decided to create a program to figure out a way to reduce those. And we call that our scope X approach. And so for the past 3 years, we have been working to create a program that is really centered around people. It's driven by processes and enabled by digital tools. From a people standpoint, we have been leveraging the decades of experience that we have doing decarbonization and carbon management for our clients across the globe and turn that into a system of best practices. We have a centralized network of carbon practitioners that can do carbon modeling and support with delivery globally. And we also have carbon topics into our mandatory annual training. And we have over 30 hours of training on our learning platform, ranging from big topics, general topics, to very detailed carbon modeling. Some of it we have done with one-click LCA. We have something we call the Carbon Boot Camp, which is like a 40-hour training. From the process side, we have a global policy that outlines our commitment that's publicly available on our website. And we have procedures and workflows that are written for a non-technical audience. The effort here is to move sustainability responsibility from the experts and into the general population, primarily of engineers. And then from a tool side, we have a variety of internally developed and industry available tools. We are very proud to be the first to sign on to the enterprise agreement with OneClick. It is a cornerstone of our Scope X approach, and it's enabling us to scale carbon modeling and carbon knowledge across our company. To the right here, we had our program certified by PAS 2080 last year. And both the global program and then we have a local UK and I verification as well. And we just went through our first annual assessment, and there were 3 key takeaways from that. First, we were recognized as being able to push sustainability into the engineering disciplines and making sure that sustainability really is everyone's job and not a specialist item. Then we were acknowledged for leveraging our industry relationships, and we work with our peers, the companies that we typically compete with. We get together to make sure that our clients can feel comfortable with the services they are receiving, regardless of whether they work with us or our competitors. And then finally, for our enterprise agreement with OneClick, not only does it enable us to scale within, but because it's a collaborative relationship, we're able to continue to influence future product development and then keep expanding the benefit more broadly in the business. All right, let's see. This is a challenge. Okay. Now I'm going to zoom out just a little bit to talk more broadly about what companies like AECOM should be doing and are doing to influence decarbonization more broadly. This figure to the left here, you might be familiar with it if you're familiar with PAS 2080. It's basically illustrating the proportionate influence that we have depending on when we're engaged in making decisions in an asset's life cycle. So whether you're talking about a building or infrastructure, it's generally the same. Now, at the most extreme, we could encourage our clients to build nothing, which would be 100% avoided carbon, but I think us in the room here, that's not the business that we're in. We're here to facilitate building better infrastructure and buildings. So typically, our effort is focused around maximizing the opportunities for carbon reduction. I think this, it makes sense, but it is incredibly difficult to convince a client to think about the carbon decisions that can be made early enough because they're not thinking about it then. So I think that is the challenge we're going to revisit a little bit later in this talk, but something I'm interested in talking with you guys about later is how to do that better. And so I think from a principle standpoint, what we can do as AEC firm is really maximize those opportunities at every single stage. Establish guidance for project baseline and target setting, making sure that is appropriate for the kind of task and the kind of data that we have available. It's also really important to monitor the progress that you're making, not just making a commitment up front and then kind of forgetting about it until the end. And then increasing awareness. Talk to clients, talk to employees, and talk to our supply chain. I'm going to zoom out one more level. So one of the aha moments that we've had over the past few years is that there are some significant limitations about thinking about things from an organizational net zero and a scope 1 and 2 and 3 perspective. The figure to the left here illustrates the way we typically think about it. In this case, there's a building that's going to be built. The asset owner has all the responsibility in terms of setting the targets and pushing requirements for carbon down the chain. They may have net zero targets, but they might not think to include that in procurement. We see that all the time. From a designer's perspective, we might have the ability to recommend lower carbon design options and materials, but if the client's not mentioning it and we don't think it's important, we may be less likely to incorporate that. And that's kind of how it flows all the way down. But if you instead think about it more as an interconnected systems of policies and think a little bit more broadly, and you started thinking about other players like policymakers and investors and material suppliers, then it enables you to realize a lot more carbon reduction opportunities. So in the second example, which is overly simplified, but it's just to show a concept, the owner would flow down net zero requirements not only to the designer, but it would send signals ultimately to the operator and the material supplier about what's about to come down the chain. The investor, I didn't include arrows there, but clearly investor signals and policymaker signals are super important in order to enable value chain decarbonization. Okay, now we're going to talk through some examples. It's quite challenging, yeah. Some examples where we worked collaboratively with our clients. So this first example, we've been working with BBC Workplace Building Portfolio for about 3 years. Where the main driver is a wish to rely less on fossil fuel in addition to optimizing for energy efficiency and lower cost. And so we have been working with them on several of their facilities. Let's see. Yeah, building performance, optimizing MEP systems, and then implementing heat decarbonization strategies. So this picture right here is for BBC Scotland's headquarters. We recommended an air source heat pump system that had a digital twin energy model that optimized the energy performance to deliver 50% annual carbon savings. And at another site in London, we identified 15 bespoke solutions that had no capital investment requirements, and that yielded a 20% reduction in the first year and a 24% reduction in carbon the second year, which is pretty impressive. The second one is the Transpennine rail improvement. The Transpennine route is a 76-mile improvement between York and Manchester. The whole purpose of the improvement is to boost reliability, connectivity, and economic growth. The client challenged us to a minimum of 12% carbon savings and a stretch goal of 30% for this project. We leveraged a carbon management plan that was in alignment with PAS 2080. And then we had a carbon baseline early that the disciplines kept checking in on as they were developing their work. There were two core enablers here. One was the Sustainable Design Register that kept track of all the carbon savings opportunities that we were identifying, and then a tracker to monitor progress and then keep the program accountable. We also leveraged collaborative workshops, so we included designers, contractors, and suppliers early to make sure that we could maximize benefit. And you can see the carbon savings numbers here. All right, this third one is for confidential clients. They have a lot of logistics centers. They wanted to test out how they could possibly get to a net zero warehouse design. And we leveraged a staged modeling approach in this case. So we used EcoZero, which is an AECOM developed structural design tool to look at early stages opportunities for saving carbon. And then we incorporated that results into a one-click LCA whole life carbon model. We also modeled operational energy in a virtual environment. The main thing that we did here is that we worked to challenge the client by looking at a different building form. So even before we got to the spec change, we were able to convince them to make edits to the building shape that would significantly reduce the materials required. We had originally a 15-year lifespan. We convinced them to significantly increase that to reduce overall whole life carbon. And then we leveraged the experience that we have here to develop a template that this client can use all over the world to deliver or to build net zero buildings. All right, and for the last example, we don't only deliver this for our clients, we use this approach that we call the Scope X approach for our own work as well. So in this example, we had a fit out in our Adelaide, Australia office. And we looked at both embodied and operational carbon here. We developed a reference model early on that we kept revisiting just to make sure that we were making the maximum reductions that we could. We were able to realize a over 50% reduction in embodied carbon by looking at design materials. For the operational carbon, it was a little bit more complicated. So we were able to come up with a scenario where we had a 100% renewable energy power purchase agreement, 50% wind, 50% solar. But we were limited by the building's metering infrastructure as well as our own enterprise policies. So we haven't been able to realize this, which is why we have a little asterisk there. Overall, 10.4% improvement, but we have the potential to get almost 80% reduction in whole life carbon. And since we're talking about operational carbon, there's a little bit more leeway there to realize those savings later on. Okay, so I want to end this talk by talking a little bit about what we can do going forward. Last time I was here in London was for London Climate Action Week. We had a panel where we heard from our clients, mostly in the infrastructure sector, about what they need from companies like us to be able to enable decarbonization. And what we heard very clearly is that carbon can't be an add-on or a value add. It has to be part of business as usual. It has to be embedded into standard project delivery and governance. There's an acknowledgement that this requires a cultural shift and more skilled practitioners and shared responsibility across the value chain. But there was a general agreement that principles like what is put forth in PAS 2080 is really going to help us get there. There was also an acknowledgement that there's some tension between standardization and innovation. So we want to make sure that we have high quality standard processes, but we can't let that get in the way of being more innovative. So where should we go from here? So as asset owners, They really need to lead by example, support innovation, and invest in early engagement to encourage carbon modeling. I can't tell you how much I wish our clients would be willing to do that. So often, they ask for sustainability to be incorporated, but it gets cut when money's tight up front, and then we end up chasing it all the way through. And so with the extent to which we can convince our clients that they will actually save money by spending a little bit more upfront, it's a major challenge we're still working on. From our side, advisors and designers, we need to be better at challenge our clients, upskill our teams, and then collaborate with peers to make sure that our clients feel confident in the results that they get. Technology providers can keep evolving fit-for-purpose tools and making them more open and accessible. And then industry groups. They have a really good opportunity to facilitate knowledge sharing, be that third-party provider who can assess methods and standards and encourage uptake across the industry. And that's it. Thank you.